So today we're going to be talking about the houses. The houses, places, topics, arenas, topoi, bhava. Topoi as in topics is the Greek word to signify what this layer of astrology. It's very important and very crucial to medical, electional, horary, all these different styles. Houses are a very crucial part, and we're going to learn all about them. This planet's effects are greatly specified when we can isolate or identify where the energy of the planet will show up. I like to say that each planet has a different radio station, and that each planet has a radio station that best picks up its frequency. And these stations are the houses. Yeah, accurate birth time is required for this, for any really meaningful predictions. Some things can be done. You can do things without the birth time, or you can rectify charts as well. There's all this, but this is more work. If you're willing to do it, go for it. So there's two systems: equal, quadrant. Well, we're going to use equal in the whole sign, so that's what we're going to focus on. We divide the ecliptic into 360 degrees into 12 pieces of 30 degrees, and we assign them to both zodiac sign and the house. So the 30 degrees of a specific sign will be entirely represented by that arena or that topoi, that place. The reason we use this is because, well, A, I find that it's predictively way more accurate, and B, it's easier, and C, we don't discount the people in higher latitudes who get really distorted charts as we go further and further north. The systems that are distorted by this is the quadrant house system, where we use the cross, the descendant, and then, the descendant, midheaven, nadir, and ascendant to kind of all calculate where the houses would be. But there's a lot of it's not that it's useless. It is completely useful. We just use it for different things. Use both. How about that? But first, for this class, we're going to use whole sign system to kind of represent what I was talking about. Yeah, on the outside we have the signs, and then the numbers are the houses, the places. And so we can see where the layers add up. And you can see how, some are smaller than others. We know this might be a quadrant system. So all zodiac signs are equal, but not all the houses are equal in power. This is really important to kind of define. The angles are of utmost importance in all systems of astrology, really, that I've seen. They're called kintron, kindras, pivots, stakes. These are the angles that anchor the whole chart. We have the ascendant, descendant, MC, medium coeli, and the IC, imum coeli, nadir. So this is the horizon line, right? At a specific person's birth or an event, the horizon will show us what is arising and what is falling away. Very literal, right? That's where we get a lot of delineations and significations, is along this first and seventh. These angles. We have 1, 10, 7, 4. 1, 4, 7, 10. They are a nice square. They're squared. These are this line, this ascendant line, kind of shows what is external and what is internal, because we have first through seventh, which are our more intimate houses, is less visible to the public, and not that it's not visible to anyone, it's just more intimate. Has to do with I, me, my, in a lot of senses. And then the external public is going to be above the horizon line, where what is literally visible in the sky. That makes a lot of sense. The first house is the house that has both an external and internal component, which is why the first house is associated with the self, because it's the axis of the micro macro axis, right? It's the alchemical axis. The first contained within the first house is the entire essence of an entire person's birth chart, as we expand that out to include all of the sky. So that's why the first is the most important. So we have them categorized by angularity. This is crucial to understand because, this is the foundation of Hellenistic astrology. So you want to think of them in these ways in terms of, angular stuff, as we mentioned before, who you are, where you live, who you are with, and what you do. The first house right here. It's your physical, it's your constitution, it's your personality. It's the stuff, it's really relevant for medical astrology because aspects, and which we'll get into in the Astro Basics 2, aspects to the first house can directly impact the physical body. Where you live is the fourth. That's if you look directly below your feet, you're going to find the fourth house. That's where you live. That's your roots. That's your ancestry, home. The mothership, right? Seventh is who you're with, partnerships and contracts. 10th is what you do. That's like anything you'll ask someone at a bar. It's very angular, very concrete, and we use these to define someone almost. Succeeding, this is resources. This is 2, 5, 8, and 11. What you have, what you create, what others have, and who you trust. So that's 2 here is what you value. It's not just what you have. It's you collect what you value, right? If I like this thing, I'm going to amass it. It also has to do with substance and movable wealth, stuff you can pick up and move around. Not your house, right? Your house would be over here in fourth. 2 squared is 4. So your assets, your immediate movable assets, become and strengthen, purchase, set up the fourth, which is the fixed assets, right? Where you live and vehicles and things like that as well. But that's angular. But we're back to succeedent. Then we have the 5th, which is what you create: passions, fortune, and children. This is our creative gas tank. It's the amount of energy we have to harness our potential and to put ourselves, to gather the inspiration within ourselves. It's an internal source of energy, right? It's below the horizon. The 8th is now above the horizon, what others have. So it went from what you have to oppose it 180 degrees. It's from what I have to what you have. And this has to do with inheritance, trusts, both of money and resources, but also like literally trust, because this house has to do a lot with change of fortune as well. 11th is the last. It's who you trust, and that's going to be your social realm, your colleagues, not intimate resources like family, not familials, but your external relationships. We have to remember, keep going back to that reference point, the horizon, these kendra, and define the houses based on them and use them as an anchor point. Last is Caden. This is seen as the most difficult, the duty of decline. It's where power is winding down, things are ending. It's generally considered to be the most difficult places. Daily grind is the first cadent. This is your surroundings, your neighborhood, your familiars, your immediate duties, and things like that. All right, it's the mailman's route. It's where you go, who you see on a daily basis, even if you don't know who they are. these things shape our consciousness in subtle ways because we are surrounded by them immediately. This is generally the house of brothers, siblings, and usually younger siblings, depending on who the author of the text. But then you have so this is the daily grind. From that we move into physical maintenance. This is the house generally of servitude, illness, bad fortune, refinement, prevention, and entropy. So this is the house of preventative measures, right? Doing the things that we kind of don't want to do, but that are to ward off a greater evil. Like, for example, combing your hair will prevent it from knotting up. Brushing your teeth prevents your teeth from falling out. Taking your blood pressure medication prevents all types of things. 9th, soul's grind. So this is considered the least bad of the cadence because it's spiritual and can bring great clarity, insight, and awakens spirit. It's the house of God. We'll review that in the planetary joys at the end. But this is distant journeys, spirituality, dharma, purpose, and charity. Generally, this was seen as a very troublesome house because the ancients viewed long-distance journey as being a kind of an affliction. It was better to stay home. Usually you die on journeys, long journeys. You encounter diseases, thieves, foreign places. Like there's no maps drawn, right? It's has a very strong element of the unknown, and so the soul's grind. In that, though, we explore and find our purpose, and that's huge. 12th is cadent, spiritual challenges, loss, mortality, isolation, mystery dissolving, chronic illness, death. This is the house that is immediately moving down towards being swallowed by the ascendant and moving down below the earth. So this house has a strong association with loss, and that's spiritually challenging because when you attach yourself to physical things of the 3rd and the 6th, and you've amassed them, you've taken care of them, you've enjoyed them, you've sought pleasure through them, you've made contracts and partnerships through these physical things, and only to come to the 12th to lose them. This is a spiritual crisis. This is a spiritual opportunity. This is a spiritual house. Quadruplicity's elements. This one, we're applying that cadence, succeeding angular thing to the elements. Generally, we see let's say the first house is the self, the second is material, the third is social, and the fourth is emotional, right? Me, my stuff, my siblings and family, my home, my emotional attachments to mother, my development of my emotions. And these repeat: self, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th. That's why they're called quadruplicities. So we have kind of like a fire element association with self, because these things move us toward greater independence, right? Sense of service in a lot of senses. Dharma. 9th. So we have a trine here, and it's shown, the shape is a triangle, and we associate, okay, let's say this independent thing is a quality, has attributes of fire, but we have an angular fire, we have a succeedent fire, and we have a cadent fire. And we'll notice that the self always opposes the social, and the material always opposes the emotional, spiritual. So there's these houses have these natural rhythms and these thematic flows based on these oppositional things. And it's important to consider the houses as oppositions. But, we have this self of first in my partner. Generally it's seen as being the other. Me, the other. My stuff, your stuff. Short distance journey, long distance journey. Home, what I do at home, what I do at the office. My personal creative energy and the way I express that, and the way I'm appreciated for that, and the way that is viewed and received by the public, right? Then 6th is, this burdensome house of servitude, and then it's across from this house of letting go in the end of these hardships. So, kind of like physical challenges and then spiritual challenges. So go through this and kind of meditate on it, like what these would mean. Generally, we have, that the fire signs are about friction and friction, and the air sign is about condensation and dispersal. They are yang, they express, they give, they contract. Earth is crystallization, and water is stagnation or flow. And these two are yin. They are impressionable, they expand, and they receive. So if we think about these qualities in relation to the angularities of before, we get various meanings and descriptions that further give us insight into the meaning of the house. Right? So angular is physical, succeeding is resource, and cadent is obligations. This is my fire physical, my resource fire, and my obligatory fire. The meanings of the houses are lined up with aspectual, the good aspectual parts of astrology, I guess you could say. You have the dark houses here that are more like bad, like considered harder thematically, more difficult to work through. They're the grinding, gruesome, difficult, chronic kind of. They're really, really intense, and they're seen this way because they're seen as things that we can't predict, can't prepare for. You're helpless against, you're hopeless against, you're defenseless against, because they're dark houses. From the first, we have a sextile, square, and trine, and then an opposition. So these houses are visible from the first, but you could call them a like here you have spots that are called aversion, right? They're averted to the first. You can't see them, and they're the houses right on either side of the horizon. That's important because they're the most turbulent, because they're moving from what? They're going from the internal realm, the personal realm, to the external realm, and there's difficulty in that, moving from one to the other. Independence to needing others, from needing others back to independence, and the shifts and the problems that comes with. You have the second, which is considered a dark house because the root of all evil is money. Sixth, physical challenges, disease. Eighth is inherited instability of matter, which has to do with permanent changes. And kind of occult sciences. It's the modern house of death, even though the Indians consider the second quite a strong house of death, an oversaturation of the life force. But the eighth is a modern house of death. And then 12th, which is spiritual challenges, right? Emaciation, recovery, loss, decay. But it's funny to notice that the malefic's joy here, and we'll talk about joys later, but Mars loves being in the dark house. He loves being on this unstable axis of the horizon. So, Mars is over here doing his thing, and Saturn's over here having joy, which means they're more effective. They're in their office, they're in their element, they're in their prime to do what they are best at. And so you can see that they oppose each other. We'll get into those joys now. So this is, again, kind of reviewing the traditional kind of Hellenistic names. The helm was considered the first, the head, the helmet, right? That's where we get the word. The subterranean angle, the setting angle, and the culminating angle. The reason they have these really dry, astrological names is because people kind of assume that you would know what they mean inherently. You understand what it means when something's high in the sky, that's the most visible, and you understand when something's low in the sky or below the earth, it's not visible. So they figured kind of the delineations were the significations were pretty straightforward. What we notice here is that the daytime, first, these planetary symbols represent where the planet joys or rejoices or is most effective, like I mentioned earlier. We have Mars and Saturn. We have Venus and Jupiter, the benefics oppose each other. And then the luminaries oppose each other and their joys as well. It is my belief that, you know, the planetary joys are are inherent to the significations of the houses. They didn't. I think they rose maybe together, but they are intertwined, and they rose at the same moment. The daytime joys are Sun, Jupiter, Saturn. That's 9, 11, 12. That's the visible houses where they do best. And the ninth in the house of God, the Sun in the house of God, and the 11th in the house of your social network, and 12 Saturn. Then you have 3, 5, and 6 below the horizon, the nighttime joys, who are more sensorial and like the pleasures of the earth rather than the spiritual above the earth matters. And then we see Mercury joys in the first. He doesn't have an opposition, and he loves being in the first because he can be what? Both day and night, good and bad. He can be the binary. He can be both, hermaphroditic, Hermes and Aphrodite, right? The dual nature. He's not neutral. He's both good and bad, right? He's not neither. He's both. And I kind of went over that just now. He's considered good as a morning star and malefic as an evening star, Mercury. I mean, it's kind of like we each have a good and a bad angel, but it's who we cultivate communication with and the way we communicate our consciousness, what's in our consciousness, that really develops us. Mercury is hugely important for developing the consciousness of the sun. The sun and Mercury are very close together, right? Mercury is always nearby, and we can only see it when the sun is below the horizon line. And so, as such, he'll either be a morning or an evening star. Morning stars are considered benefic. Evening stars are considered malefic. So Mercury is a bisect planet. Bisexual. The moon joys in the third house. Well, that's weird. You'd think it'd be fourth because the moon is mother and fourth is the mother. But here, we see the foundation. This is all Demetra George, by the way. Here we see the foundation meaning of the third house as siblings. The moon goddess Selene reflects the light of her brother as poetically phrased by Manilius, writing in the 1st century in his exposition that the third house acknowledges the moon as mistress, who beholds her brother's realm shining on her from the other side of the heavens. Again, stressing and making a strong crease along that 1st and 7th axis. The third house meaning of siblings is directly derived from the moon's connection to this house. Drawing down the moon is a magical, ritual concept from the 9th to the 3rd, from the house of God to the house of the goddess, right? The religious dogma and the heaviness of 9th is totally evaporated and through the sacred rites and divination of the high priestess, right? You go in tarot, you go from it would be like the hierarchical, the high priestess card down below, and the 9th being like the Pope card, right? I forget what his name is. Then I'm totally blanking on the name. The teacher, the guru, that concept. So the images of Helios and Selene driving their chariots across the skies kind of give you a good image of the sun and the moon and why they joy, where they joy. Venus joys in the 5th. Well, that makes sense. That's pretty easy. You don't have to really do a lot of investigation into that. Venus likes sensory pleasures, passion, sex, children, hobbies. She likes real things. You could describe a nice perfume to Venus, or you could give Venus the perfume so she can embody the rapture and enjoyment of her stimulated senses. Okay, that's easy. Mars joys in the 6th. We already kind of went over this. He likes feeling useful. He likes being appreciated for what he does. So fine, give him challenges. Mars with no challenges will create challenges. That's what a debilitated Mars does in Cancer. Or cannot nip things in the bud, can't use logic, emotional overflow, right? These are kind of parts of Mars when Mars can't function. Mars needs the kind of physical realm to deal with problems. So it makes sense. The sun rejoices in the ninth house of God, Theos. This is the original Greek name. There was an 8-house system and a 12-house system. That 12-house system is what we use in this modern age, but there was also a 8-house system, 8-house division that shows us, and that kind of shows us where the ninth house began, because the ninth would be the house in this system called the octotopos. The body moves through these houses and joins God in the ninth, the realm after death. So of course it's going to be inherently spiritual, bigger picture, more worldly. There is more to life than your own tiny ego, and kind of like, is there more than this? Questions. So it makes sense that the sun, the representative of the soul, Atma, would do well here. And it's considered the good Ketan house. And it's good because it can be a little painful to get a wider perspective, right? That's stretching, like when you stretch your muscles. There can be a little bit of a, yeah, there can be an intensity to that as well. But generally, the sun being here in the ninth will help give clarity and illuminate, and the light will overcome the darkness of the consciousness or psychology, psychological state. So yeah, the Hindus call it the house of dharma, service, charity, trusting in the cosmic powers that be. Not trusting, more faith, right? Trust would be 8th house. All right, I say that even here. We forge in the 8th house and turns to faith. Easy, so easy. Jupiter joys in the 11th. Yeah, so a social butterfly is going to do well in groups. Makes sense. I have things to share. Great, there's a bunch of people around me. It's not just physical wealth, but the wealth of ideas, doctrines, texts, and higher learning. Jupiter signifies political and religious things inherently, and that's a dangerous combo. But usually in the 11th, Jupiter is rewarded for his philosophies and theologies, and as such, he really does have everyone's best interest at heart. This is a house of hope and friendship, and one of the most powerful things you can give to someone is hope and the gift of friendship. From here, he can preach, teach, educate, assist, and understand the inherent needs of his community. Right? He's out there, door to door, Jupiter. His social capital, though, is his biggest trait. Not just the wealth he brings in charts, right? Because Jupiter posited well usually shows a wealthy person, or an influential person. More so would be a better word, influential, because influence gives you social capital. Saturn joys in the 12th. So the hopes of the 11th that we just talked about get dragged into the realm of the 12th, house of loss. Let me destroy your hope. Mental anguish, abandonment, loneliness, I'm all alone, depression, chronic and permanent problems with no solution. There's no way out. Saturn loves this because he survives. He's like the cockroach that gets squashed, right? It's like, I will be happy in any condition because I am inherently myself. I have so drawn my energy and contracted my energy within myself that in all conditions, pretense, doctrine, and formalities must be done away with. Saturn is generally seen as being kind of like kind of like the anarchy of time and death. So how it disrupts your plans, right? It's a disruptive house. The 12th house is the last 30 degrees of the chart, and the end of all things. But this can be a house of personal empowerment, like I mentioned. You can be, if you've been carrying along, the burden of a body that's been not well, it can be good to let go. It's a great cry of relief. And if we ask Saturn for help in this mysterious Ketan house, he will give us endurance and long-term planning to win or succeed, even when things seem insurmountable, right? That's why Saturn rules Capricorn and Aquarius. Capricorn is known as being, ascending the heights regardless of the weather conditions. It won't matter why we suffer, because Saturn is trying to find the ecstasy in the sober truth of all experience. Sobriety, pragmatism. And that brings me to the end of my lecture on the houses. Thanks for tuning into Queer Astrology Club. And I guess we're going to do Astro Basics 2. I'm making those videos now. But next time, move to the signs.